Hola clases! Today we're going to be focusing on writing articles, nouns, and adjectives correctly. Being able to say things in Spanish like the fun class or some smart girls or some strong kids or things like that we've been working on in the entry and exit tasks. We want to be able to put these three things together correctly so that they're ordered correctly and that they match correctly. And in order to do that, I want you to think about these phrases like they're sandwiches. When you're building a sandwich, in my opinion, the most important part of the sandwich is the meat. That really determines everything else about the sandwich. And that, in this case, are our nouns. Our nouns are going to determine our other two pieces of bread, which we'll get to in a moment. Just a reminder, nouns are people, places, or things, like chicos, profesor, escuela, hombres, or football. And again, this is going to determine the other parts of our sandwich. This meat is the most important part that is going to determine, number one, our article, our top piece of bread that we're choosing. And remember, your bread has to match the meat that you chose. You wouldn't want to put a blueberry muffin top on top of your BLT sandwich, or at least I wouldn't do that. Most people probably wouldn't. So this is our meat, and our top piece of bread is our article. And just as a reminder, these are the articles that we have been working with. The top up here are the 4 different ways to say the that we reviewed last week. These are the 2 different ways to say and these are the 2 different ways to say some. That's our top piece of bread, again determined by our noun. Our bottom piece of bread is our adjective, our describing word. And again, we just started working with these. That's like cómica or fuertes, joven, alto, rubias, the describing words. And that's how we need to think about these phrases in order to build our sandwich correctly. So let's take a closer look. Again, keeping in mind that the noun is the meat, the most important part of the phrase. So let's take a look at this. We have in English this phrase, the funny boys. But if we take a look at this in Spanish, we know that our sandwich is, quote, falling apart. And you might have heard me say that already this year. And basically what I mean by that is we need to switch it and make sure that our noun, the meat of the sandwich, goes in the middle of our sandwich and that the bread is on the outside of our sandwich. So again, it's article, noun, and adjective, and that is how we build our sandwich correctly, starting with the noun, the meat, the most important part. So if we take that phrase, the funny boys, the first thing that we need to do is realize what our most important part of the phrase is, and that is boys. That's our meat. That's our most important thing. And now, in English, our sandwich is falling apart, so we need to move it. We need to switch those so that our sandwich in Spanish is built correctly. So now if we reorder it, we have the boys funny. If you do it this way, you won't get marked down for having your 2 pieces of bread not match correctly. So let's take a look at how we say boys in Spanish. There's obviously 4 different options. We have our singular and masculine, our singular plural, and then we have the feminine side, but we know in Spanish too that that's not going to apply. So obviously we say chicos. That's our meat of the sandwich and the most important part. So once we realize that it's chicos, we need to find 2 pieces of bread, the and funny, that match chicos. And this is where I see the most mistakes in so far in Spanish too. We get the chicos part correct, but we don't get this the correct or this funny correct. So let's take a close look at this. Again, these are all the different ways that we talked about saying for the, and some. We know that we're trying to say the, and it's masculine and plural. Well, our only option for that for chicos, a masculine and plural noun, is los. It could have been unos, but we know that that means some. And we were trying to say the, we were trying to be more specific. So los is going to be our correct article. So now we have los and chicos. And notice that we have an os here, an os here, and we're going to come to find out that our adjective is going to need the same thing. If we take a look at all the different ways to say funny, we learned that there are 4 different options. Cómico, cómicos, cómica, and cómicas. Because we have a masculine plural article and noun, we have to choose this last piece of bread that matches it as well. And so we need cómicos. Los chicos cómicos is our final answer. Notice that everything matches. Same thing if we had a different phrase like some nice girls. We have to rearrange the phrase and say some girls nice and make sure that our meat, the most important part, is in the middle. Obviously, you guys know how to say girls in Spanish. That part is pretty obvious. Once we find chicas, though, we need to make sure that our some and our nice match it. So if we take a look at all of our articles, there's only one way to say some that matches chicas, and that is going to be unas. Then we have our unas. Now we need to find the correct way to say nice that matches unas and chicas. And we have 4 different ways to say nice. Obviously, based on color coding and knowing where adjectives go, we realize that simpáticas is the only one that matches it. Once again, when I say everything needs to match in Spanish, I mean that if this ends in an AS, this needs to end in an AS, and this needs to end in an AS. And again, girls determined this entire phrase because that's the meat of our phrase. That's the meat of our sandwich and the most important part. One last example before I let you do some on your own. Again, we need to rearrange this. Instead of the interesting classes, we need the classes interesting. If we know how to say classes, and pardon me, I skipped ahead. We know that classes is not masculine, so I didn't even include those options. It's more than one class, so we go down here for the plural side. Again, our the and our interesting need to match classes, or clases, in Spanish. If we take a look, we know that because it's the and it's plural, there's only one option that works here, and it's las. Now, here's the part, if we're looking at interesting, where I see some mistakes. We need to realize that there are 2 different forms of interesante. We can have plural adjectives, so we need to make sure that interesante has an S because our phrase is plural. Las clases interesantes is the correct final phrase, all of them ending in an S. Let's see if this makes sense for you guys. Take a minute and do these sentences on your own, or if you're stuck with a partner, or raise your hand and I will come around and help you. Please let me know if you have any questions, and buena suerte.